and then start with the mission statement.
Okay. Our mission. Helping Parents Heal is a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting bereaved parents to become shining light parents by providing support and resources to aid in the healing process. We go a step beyond other groups by allowing the open discussion of spiritual experiences and evidence for the afterlife in a non-dogmatic way. Affiliate groups welcome everyone, regardless of religious or non-religious background, and allow for open dialogue. Attendance today at this meeting is voluntary, and we are here for the benefit of learning from and sharing with other parents whose child has passed away. It is understood that our discussions are intended to be confidential and not designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. Helping Parents Heal offers a wide variety of speakers to allow parents to be informed about many possible ways to heal, to connect with their children, and to learn about the afterlife. The views expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect those of Helping Parents Heal, and we ask that you take from their presentations whatever may benefit you personally. Welcome,
Thank you, Irene. That's wonderful. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce William, and then we'll get started. William Peters, M.A., M.Ed., is the founder of the Shared Crossing Project, whose mission is to raise awareness and educate people about the profound and healing experiences that are possible for the dying and their loved ones. As the director of the Shared Crossing Research Initiative, William and his team collect and study extraordinary end-of-the-life experiences, shared crossings, and are recognized as the world's leading authority on the shared death experience. He has developed methods to facilitate these shared crossings and to assist experiencers in meaningfully integrating their experiences. William conducts workshops and presents nationally on his research. He is a licensed psychotherapist at the Family Therapy Institute in Santa Barbara, where he specializes in end-of-life counseling as a means towards psycho-spiritual evolution. William has served as a Zen hospice volunteer, and his work is informed by his 2 near-death experiences and a variety of shared death experiences. William's book, co-authored with Dr. Michael Kinsella, is entitled Halfway to Heaven and will be published by Simon & Schuster for worldwide release in 2021. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming William Peters.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Good to be here again. I need to find a way to get my PowerPoint up to your screen there.
Oh, okay. Is it not working? So let's see.
I should be able to do this. Okay, here I go. I got it.
You got it.
Here I go. All right, you have to tell me. Did you guys see this?
Yes, yes, I see
Good.
it.
All right, and then I'm going to go to the presentation. There it is. Okay. Well, good. It's really good to be back here. I guess I was here, I don't know, almost 2 months ago, and really got some wonderful response from so many of you who were listening, and I'm so touched by your stories. I just feel like our organizations are very kindred in a sense that we really make space, honor, and in a certain sense, really lean into these profound end-of-life experiences and ongoing communication after our loved ones have transitioned. So today we'll be going into really focus on the shared death experience. If you remember last time, I addressed the entire spectrum of end-of-life experiences, those being pre-death premonitions, pre-death dreams and visions, of course, the shared death experience, post-death visions, direct post-death communication, synchronicities throughout the end of life and after a death experience. Today, I'm going to focus on the shared death experience, which really has been the focus of the Shared Crossing Project from its inception. And the book that Elizabeth alluded to will be focused on the shared death experience. But I'll also say that we are now expanding our research to collect the full continuum of experiences. So we'll talk more about that later. So this is what we're talking about, the shared death experience, the SDE as we call it. I'll just talk a little bit about the project and its research. I'm going to present two typologies for looking at SDEs. And these are really the first two typologies ever presented on this subject. We are the first, researchers to have enough cases to really put forth some typologies. And I hope that they'll be, user-friendly. We'll talk about the positive after effects of SDEs, of which there are many. And then I'm going to talk about how if you are so inclined to share your story with us. And then really this may actually be the main part, is I want to give us time for Q&A, because last time my talk went on for well over an hour. And this time I'm hoping to do this, be done in 40 minutes or so, and give us a good, 15, 20, even a half an hour if people have more questions. And you can always send me emails, and I, most likely myself, but sometimes someone else on our team will respond as well. Okay, so diving in. So the shared death experience, here's the definition. It occurs when a loved one, caregiver, and even a bystander expresses that they feel like they shared in the dying's transition to a typically benevolent afterlife. So, and in many cases, they report that it's like I felt like I experienced the initial stages of the afterlife with my departing loved one. It's as if I was somehow there, or brought in, or able to access where my now deceased loved one resides. And of course, by saying this the way that I am, it assumes that our, what we call deceased loved one is actually alive and well in some other realm that we also get a strong sense for is quite positive, quite a benevolent experience, as we say. The theme in the shared death experiences, is the dominant motif, is journey. There's always a movement, usually upward, forward, often headed towards the light, and in many cases, as we'll see, guided by either deceased loved ones or other kind of knowledgeable ascended beings, if you will. And like I said, we'll go more into this. So, Elizabeth already brought up the mission, but here it is for you. It's really clear we want to raise awareness and educate people about these amazing experiences that are available at the end of life. And while that mission sounds so straightforward, unfortunately, our healthcare medical system doesn't really make space for the positive that can happen at the end of life. And all these experiences, even in the midst of the pain and suffering of losing a loved one, there's also this experience that so many of you know firsthand about the joy that's somehow unexplainable, but it is there, paradoxically present in the midst of the loss of a loved one. There's some profound healing, joy, bliss, transformative experiences that exists in the loss of our cherished loved ones. So the research initiative started about 8 years ago now. And it really began because I'd had experiences, primarily shared death experiences, working in hospice, and had then, as a psychotherapist, became a place where people in our community would come to share these experiences. They could share them safely. And I should say that when I met Dr. Raymond Moody, he introduced me to the concept of the shared death experience because he had coined the term. But I had these experiences, but never knew there was a name for them. And he basically he deserves the recognition quite, deservedly for the term shared death experience. So we talked extensively, and I really said to him, I thought that I could help people have these experiences. So I developed methods, I started practicing them. And our first study in 2013 was rather ambitious. It was, can we test whether we can facilitate these? And so we had 75 people come through our research, and we trained them all. You had to be a loved one. You had to be a couple where one of the persons was identifiably someone likely to die. They had a terminal illness or they were elderly. And as it turned out, the people that did in our study, this is often a problem with research, they did not die as quickly as the researchers would like for it. They actually lived a lot longer than life expectancy, because so many of the protocols and practices we did were based actually in kind of the best of East and West spiritual practices, mindfulness, forgiveness, gratitude, all these practices that open our heart and help our health. So we have since, in the subsequent 8 years, collected a fair amount of data, and we believe that our methods, anecdotally, I should say, about 50% of the people will have a shared death experience, and upwards of 80% will have some sort of spiritually transformative experience at the end of life, which we call a shared crossing. So anyway, we collected and analyzed SDEs and their after effects. This was the next study that we started about 3 years ago, and it was really to substantiate the existence of the SDE. And we were the first organization, first research institute that we're aware of on the planet that set the agenda of actually documenting the SDE and studying it deeply. And so we have, as you'll see, about 165 cases that we have studied deeply. We really have a few hundred cases, but for this study, we focused on 165. And so the goal of one of the goals is we want to share our findings about the SDE with the end-of-life care communities, healthcare communities, hospices, and the general public. And we're doing that, as I speak. So, all right. So here, just a little bit about our study. We had 107 shared death experiencers and 165 SDE accounts. So right away, you see something in the data, and that is that about 40% of our people are repeat experiencers. So that means, and this is what I learned about myself since I've had many SDEs, is that there is something about having a shared death experience that allows you, it's kind of like an initiation. You learn this landscape that exists between this life and the next, and we slowly become adepts at it, and we attune ourselves to it, whether it's conscious or not. For me, it's now conscious, and for many people who are interested in the SDE and interested in facilitating it, we talk about ways that we can develop and enhance this capacity. It's really a receptivity that you develop around people who are dying, or even if you're remote, you can tune into them. So that's how many people in our study. And then, so this is really the first main finding. And I should say that I even after we did our first round of research in 2013, 2014, 2015, I started collecting cases, and this is what I saw. I saw there were really two main types of shared death experiences. One being at bedside. That means you're present with the person dying. And the other being remote. That means you're not at the bedside of the dying. Now, Raymond Moody's research was entirely based on bedside. So when we started doing this, we started collecting other cases that had the exact same form, the exact same pattern, the same features as bedside. And we realized these are the same thing, they're just happening remotely. And so many of you, I'm thinking Elizabeth can relate to this, you can be, continents and worlds away and have a shared death experience as if you were at the bedside. So really time and space make no real difference. There was one other type of remote called a flyby. And a flyby is a very brief, almost fleeting experience where the SDE experiencer, the surviving loved one, reports that they feel like their dying loved one came to them as if to say, thank you, I love you, goodbye. And to let you know, I'm okay, all is well, you need not worry. So we see these aspects in the flyby, but it's really quick. And it doesn't have the features that we will see later on because it's just really quick. You may see them, you may sense them, but none of the kind of extraordinary features that, like I said, I'll go into in a second. So there's two other types, subtypes, I should say, and one has to do with time variation. We have found that SDEs happen you know, a few minutes, hours, and in some cases, a couple of days early. We've had a number of people on life support where a week before this person was on life support, we have a number of these cases actually, and they had an SDE with, I'm thinking of one woman who had it with her mother, and her mother said to her, "I'm ready to go, let me go." And then this lovely being came into the room as if to say, you know, we're ready to go. So there's that, the early SDEs. There's also delayed. Sometimes it's a few minutes, hours, and in a few cases, maybe a day or two. But the form is exactly the same. So I encourage people not to get hung up on the kind of medically determined time of death, because dying is a process that takes place, a kind of a titration, as we're learning, between this realm and going to what lies beyond, the afterlife, if you will, back and forth, especially in a slower death if there's a terminal illness involved. And we've also seen gradual SDEs. They can take place over hours. People can go in and out of that SDE space, that field that seems to lie just beyond human existence, and they can tap into it and then come back here and then go back again. And these are spectacular, and they can go on for, like I said, a few minutes, even hours in some cases. And then we have a multi-person. That means kind of a group of people have an SDE. That means they have one related to this person dying. And that can look like a variety of different phenomena. In other words, you don't have to experience the same thing. Some people will see amazing light and see deceased relatives. Other people will be up there in this other dimension, transitioning with the person. So they don't have to be the same. And in fact, what we do see is that there's different, when you have multiple persons, and oftentimes they're around the world having them, they will have different phenomena. And as you can see here, the SDE, these subtypes, you can have all these subtypes. So there's no exclusivity in that. Trying to go for, oh, here we go. Okay. So just so you know, I think a lot of people who are quite spiritual find this compelling. We certainly did. We learned that about 67%, 2/3 of our participants engaged in a range of meditative practices. I think you might call this mindfulness activities of some sort. It could be meditation. It could be prayer. It could be contemplation. It could be yoga. It could be walking in nature, if that's where your spiritual spot is. But they talked about a sense of receptivity to life, a sense of openness of heart and mind. And this seems to be an important characteristic of people who have these. All right, so I presented the first kind of general typology, and then I came up with the second typology, which I feel is a little bit more descriptive, a lot more descriptive of the experience that an SDE experiencer will have. So this talks about what they're sensing, what they're feeling, what they're seeing, what they're observing. What is their experience? And we have we call these modes of participation. So this is 4 ways of participating in an SDE. And I'll go through each one of these, and I'll show you a video as well. But remotely sensing a death is the first one. And this is like a quarter of our respondents, our interviewees, will have this. And it will be sensing, it'll be thoughts, feelings, a sense of presence, usually right around the time of death. And it's really usually quite pleasant. I've had this a number of times with people who are dying, and they just come to me. I see them usually, I certainly sense them. I get a big heart opening. I feel their presence. And and they tell me quite clearly, it's all kind of the sense of knowing, not a verbal communication. They're usually filled with joy and glee and very like kind of moving very well, almost acrobatically, the way I experience them, very, very very free from their body, so to speak. So, and they usually say what I said before. These are kind of typical flybys. I'm a well, I thank you, I love you, I so appreciate our time together, and just want you to know that I'm going, and this is it, and I'm just at peace. So that's what we see about 16% of the time. But then there's this sudden onset of sympathetic physical symptoms. And this can be a little disturbing because I'll show a video about this in a moment. But oftentimes the symptoms seem to have some relationship to what the person dying is experiencing. So we've had persons, who have experienced drug overdoses in their children, and they will talk about vomiting and not being able to breathe and being very afraid. And then they'll say that it transitions into a peace. Everything's okay. But while they're in that, it's very disconcerting. And sometimes they have a sense who that person is, and sometimes they don't. And that's, that can be disconcerting. Sometimes they don't even know that they're feeling the other person's feelings or experience. And just by me saying that, is an assumption too, but I think that's what they say, is that I had this the same time this person was dying, and I feel that I was with them in some way, a sympathetic physical connection. Okay, so this is going to be Dawn, and she's going to share with her what we call a remote shared death experience, and it is sympathetic. Hers is a mild sympathetic, but you will see that she definitely gets. So Dawn is a nurse, but her son, who was in his mid-20s, was engaged to be married. He had gone out 2 days before his marriage, and you will see what happens here. He has a tragic accident and dies. So you will see Dawn talk about this.
I truly had the physical symptoms, being nauseated, almost passed out, couldn't see, took off my glasses, everything went black, then it came back right away. I almost told my husband that things just happened so fast. Within 4 minutes, I'm getting a phone call that he was hit. And then just right after that, oh my gosh, that's so weird. I just felt that. I felt what happened. I had a premonition, and I've told everybody, I felt my kid the moment he died. I always said that if that's the only blessing that I get, I won't ask for anything else. I've only had 3 small dreams about him in the 3 years, and 2 of them were in the very beginning, then another one, along the way. And I always say, if I don't get any other blessings, I'm okay, because I have this blessing that I think really, truly has helped me walk a different path, a better healing path, a more coping path than a lot of other moms. I don't even seek out compassionate friends, because in the beginning, it's like, my son and his best friend died. This is what I felt. This is the time that it happened. In the beginning, I would say this stuff, and it was like the shocker of the story. And I don't want to always be that person, but I've said since day one, I will stand on my rooftop as a normal, average American who makes average money, who has an average life, who has 3 decent children, that doesn't take any medicine, that this is what happened to me. I feel like I felt my son as he passed from this earth.
So Dawn gives quite a heartfelt, authentic, compelling account of what she experienced when her son died in a tragic car accident. What's interesting about Dawn is she is an ER nurse, and in the medical community, these experiences can be looked at somewhat dismissively, shall we say. Not all the time, but can be. So you see her conviction in the environment she works in to really have to honor what she experienced. And you also see, as so many of you know, the healing that comes from these experiences. She says, if this is the only communication I ever have with him, that is enough. I know he's alive and well. And so it's a beautiful account. So the next one we have, this is the second mode participation. It's witnessing unusual phenomena. It's the most common. And by the way, these are not exclusive. So, but witnessing phenomena is what we see more than anything else. And the most common form of witnessing phenomena is a vision of the dying. Over half of these types of accounts will see the deceased loved one. Not sense, not feel, they will see them. See them transitioning, see them in another dimension beyond this human dimension. A quarter will have reported seeing transcendent light. And that comes a lot of different ways. It's either changes the room, they're in a place where they feel like this channel of light is drawing them upwards. 1 in 5, 20% will sense profound energy. 19% roughly alternations in time and space. People report feeling like dizzy or like they went into another dimension or they didn't know where they were, but it was amazing. Then there's encounters with non-human entities. These are often described as kind of mysterious beings that seem to have some sort of purpose for being in the experience. I tend to think that these beings are somehow involved in conducting the transition. They are very purposeful. They are not there for the caregivers or loved ones. They are there solely to assist the person transitioning. They're kind of orderly and businesslike even. And we had that from the research as well. Also, you see the spirit leaving the body. We're going to have an example of this. In fact, we will have an example of this today with Sally. This is quite profound. We always ask, like, what, people talk about seeing the spirit leave the body. We say, what does that look like? Well, we're going to see an experience report of this today. The other one is experience encounters with deceased loved ones. That's about 13%. And then heavenly realms, these mystical, magical realms that are hyper alive and very comfortable and awe-inspiring. So these are the main phenomena we see when witnessing unusual phenomena. So now we're going to go see Sally, and Sally is going to talk about witnessing this unusual phenomena. It's spirit leaving body. Sally's going to be at the bedside of her mother.
I saw this membranous type thing come away from the whole periphery of her body. And it was defined. It was definitely an edge. And as it came apart, coming up from the body to fill this thing was like this gray stuff. And I say stuff because, I've been thinking about this since I talked to you guys, and I just cannot put my hand on anything specific to tell you what it was like. I mean, yeah, foggy, no, it had a little more particulate stuff to it. It was something in this form at this time solid enough that it was still in a three-dimensional thing for me to see. So it moved though, it congealed, and it slowly came together around her. And this membrane, and I think this one had to be three-dimensional, but I could only see 2 dimensions in this thing. So this membrane opened like this and started going up towards the corner as a little bit, like a feather edge started going up of the grayish stuff, started going up with the tunnel. I called it a tunnel. I don't know if it was three-dimensional, but anyhow. And as it started to go up, the rest started to follow more solid. Now I'm picturing the room. I'd say about halfway up to that corner, it started going a little faster from the body, and the corner, and a little less fast up to the corner where it started to disappear, this tube, and the edges of the tube anyhow. And it just kept going up, and soon it was all out of her body and almost all disappeared at the top until the very last bit just went up fast. Once she's up in the corner there, I'm looking up there, I know she's up there, and I feel this love come into my body. It just was so wonderful. It just poured into my body, and I didn't get goosebumps or anything. It just was love and filled me totally. And I smiled, and probably was, I don't know if I was more than smiling, but I know I was extremely happy, extremely happy. After a while, she was back. I think she was looking at them. And then after a while, she came back to me and she sent me a message. It wasn't just the love that I felt before, it was different. It was like, oh, I am so full of joy. I'm so happy. This is her. And I felt that. I felt her.
So really a beautiful, in-depth description of what she saw. And we refer to this as, spirit consciousness leaving the body and in some sort of physical representation. And then, of course, the profound feelings of love that she feels that her mother was giving back to her, letting her know everything's okay, more than okay, just spectacular. So this is, the witnessing of phenomena. This is our second kind of mode of participation. And then we come to our third mode of participation. This is accompanying the dying. So this occurs when the experiencer says that they left their body and they were in some sort of visionary realm. It's a realm where they're they see, or they typically see or witness these amazing landscapes, gardens, castle, otherworldly regions. It can be spectacular nature. It can be nature very familiar to us, oceans and valleys. It's usually spectacular in its grandeur. They also talk about, in this accompanying experience, acquiring special knowledge about how things are, the ultimate reality, what really matters in life. There's some sort of teaching that gets transpired, or I should say, that gets, it's a transmission of some sort from some benevolent source, or maybe even the person, that gives them a special sense of knowing how things are. And then there often is an appearance of a border or some sense that the experiencer can go no further. Their experience is over. The person dying continues on, usually towards the light, but they're done. They've had their journey as far as they can go, and the experiencer returns to their human life again. So for this one, this is a lovely one. This is Cynthia. So Cynthia's going to tell an experience she had when her husband, Shar, was dying. He actually chose a voluntary stopping of eating and drinking as a way to end his life, because he had Alzheimer's and he didn't want to go through that. So he, just kind of hastened his end of life, his death. But you'll see so beautifully how Cynthia is going to be ascending with Shar up a tunnel, and then there's a beautiful appearance of a relative, Shar's mother. It's as if Cynthia hands off Shar to his mother. So here we go.
So I remember lifting up out of my form, my body, and then taking my husband, his name was Shar, by the hand and pulling him up. And then then I pulled him up past me, and then he pulled me up past him. And we kept doing that for, for a long time. I don't really know. So a lot of stuff was probably going on that I don't know about. And it was, the sensation was very freeing. He was fully intact. He wasn't mentally compromised then. There was no sensation of constraint or discomfort from anybody's body. And then I saw the light. I almost feel corny saying that, but I saw the light, and it's not like a pinpoint light. It's it's huge light, and I told him that, look, there is the light, and we both turned towards it and went towards it, and then his mother appeared, and in the experience of the light, there was a complete wholeness sensation for me. A lot of freedom was in that. A lot, any of my own psychology wasn't there. None of that was there. It was just that opportunity to experience that. And then his mother reached to him, and then he reached to her, and he was still holding my hand, and he looked back at me and said, but I want to stay with you. And then he slipped away. And I think that was it. I don't remember too much after that.
So here you see this feature of ascension that we see quite a bit, and then accompanying, she is quite directly accompanying Shar as they move up this channel of some sort. And then the appearance of a recognizable deceased loved one, her mother-in-law. And, Shar expresses his desire not to leave her, but he goes on. And of course, we talk about this boundary. In that moment, Cynthia can go no further. Shar continues on with his mother, and Cynthia returns to her earthly life. So that's an example of accompanying, quite a beautiful one. So assisting the dying is like accompanying. This is our fourth and final type of mode of participation in a shared death experience. It's similar to accompaniment, but the participants express that they feel like they were somehow invited in and in some ways required to assist in the transition. And sometimes these people say they didn't even know what they were doing. They just said they got there, they realized they had to help their loved one transition, and the knowledge for how to assist this person just came to them. Now, this case we're going to have is with Mark, and Mark is assisting his father. This is a remote SDE, and by the way, all assisting the dying are remotes. We do not have any. I think we have 12 of these cases, and they're all remote. So he's going to be talking about being in the passenger seat of the car, and somewhere in the United States, in New Jersey actually, and his father is dying in a hospital bed in Canada because he's Canadian. And so here we go. You'll see that Mark really is good about talking about this.
There's that connection that we have with other people that we love, like in particular with my father, I had that connection, and I still do. I could feel my father. I was like, I need to check in on him, and so I sent my spirit to the hospital where I knew he was. I remember going to him at his bedside and speaking to him and saying, Dad, it's like, why don't you just let go? Mom's going to be all right. All us kids are going to be all right. You can go. Like, there's nothing holding you here anymore. And he looks at me. The puzzlement was in his face as he said, I don't know how. I knew right away as soon as I was there with my dad, picked him up. And I started that meditation, walking down this particular trail. And at a certain point, turn and step up these stairs and walking towards the light. So we're walking side by side. And I took him to the light. And as we got close, my father and my grandmother had a really, really close and beautiful and amazing, magical relationship. As we got close to the light, you know, there was like a door where the luminosity of the light coming out of there was just was unbelievable. And my grandmother steps out of that light, and she's standing there, and my dad, the look on his face was just so peaceful and beautiful. And as we approached the light, my grandmother and my uncle both, first my grandmother stepped out of the light, and they were yeah, very, very close. And so again, it's the look of joy on his face when he saw my grandmother was just like a look I hadn't seen in his face in years and years and years. And he just went and hugged her. And my uncle came out of the light at that point. And he joined the fray, and the three of them were just you know, the joy was just unbelievable. And you know, none of them touched me. You know, they were very, 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 very clearly that I wasn't part of that group. But you know, that my job was done. Like, I brought my dad there, and now like they had it. It was really how it felt, and they didn't speak to me either. And then my dad, he just turns and looks at me, and it's just this huge smile on his face, and he just said, I didn't know that it was this easy. I woke up the next morning, and the phone rang, and it was for me. And I answered the phone. I said, "It was my brother." And he said, "You know, Dad passed away." And I said, "Yeah, I know."
So there's a real good example of someone, Mark, assisting his father. And you get the sense that his father was somehow lost in the transition, and Mark picked up the signal. He was receptive, quite a spiritual man, was able to go there remotely and assist his father in this transition. And, you know, then the appearance of his grandmother, Mark's grandmother, that's the appearance of a being, you know, of a recognizable deceased loved one. Once the light is, you know, spectacular in his experience. And then he realizes that he can go no further. He realizes that he's done his job, and his father's going on with his mother, and he returns to his human life. And then he gets confirmation the next morning from his brother that his father died at roughly the same time.
You know,
okay, so, you know, these experiences are profound for sure, but I wouldn't be doing this work if I didn't think that there were really healing, beneficial after effects for this. You know, the phenomena is spectacular, but the after effects are really, really wonderful for people. And like I said, you and your community know this. When you have this communication with your, you know, your children who have died, and it allows your relationship to continue. You have a bond with them. It evolves, it changes, but you are still in relationship because you know something really important. And this is what you get in the SDE here, a knowing that the deceased are happy and at peace. You know they are well. And so Arlene says here, I have not dreamed about her, but I don't need to. I know she is in a place filled with love and no pain. These are all shared death experiencers. Leslie says, I knew it was my father who had come to tell me that he had died and that he was at peace and well in an afterlife. And then Tricia said, I feel at quite at peace. He's moved on and he's happy. So this is the first really profound after effect. You know, over 2/3 of the people have this real sense that their departed are alive and well and happy. This is really spectacular. 90% of the people we interviewed said that they were convinced that life exists beyond human death. There's a certainty of an afterlife. This goes along with the near-death experience research as well. Oh, this is a great one. So remember Sally, she saw her mother leave the body, spirit leaving the body, and then go to the roof, the membrane, all that. Well, this is what Sally says. You're going to see me ask her about what this experience meant to her. To what question is this experience you had with your mother? What is the question of this experience you had with your mother? Answer?
Oh, is there life after death? That was my question. Yeah. I wanted to know, okay, some of the stuff in the Bible, is there everlasting life? And I had inklings that there was, but she sealed it. She nailed it for me.
Yes, so both Sally and her mom were uncertain, questioning whether an afterlife existed. And you can see how this experience, just as Sally said, sealed it for her. Beautiful. All right, and here's another one. Life purpose. 43%, almost half, report that their SDE left a profound mark on what they perceive to be life's meaning and purpose. And this is really important because I know so many in your community, Elizabeth as well, it speaks to this, and just your whole work is a manifestation of these profound losses of 2 children and how it really contributed to not just a shaping of, it literally birthed a life purpose for you of meaning. And so this is really common. So here's Valerie. She says, everything I do today, all the intuitive work and all that is a direct response of my first husband's dying. I used to sell mainframe software and my life is completely different because of it now. Now, Valerie is a past life regression therapist of quite acclaim and guides people to the afterlife and to see what life is all about and what the purpose of human life is and what have you. So this is really, really meaningful for people to, in the midst of this great loss, to see a purpose for life revealed. Alleviation of death anxiety, 52% of the people reported that their SDE left them with less or no fear of death. We should have asked this question. This is a really conservative estimate. We didn't ask this as much, but we know over half have an alleviation of death anxiety. Also, we're going to listen to Sharon talk about this. This is a beautiful case. Sharon's talking about experience she had with actually her caregiver, her nanny who took care of her children died, and she was quite close to her. And so you'll see how Sharon talks about this. Excuse my gruff look there.
Well, I don't like to experience pain, but otherwise I find I don't have a lot of fear of dying. I don't particularly want to die sooner. I'm liking it here, but I don't have the same degree of fear of dying that many others do, and that I think I had at one time. I think I might have been very fearful of dying as a child. I don't really actively remember that, but I do remember fear. And I think that it was connected to that fear of annihilation or death. And I don't think of death that way anymore. It doesn't seem like an annihilation at all to me. And I think it is probably because of what happened with Delia.
So Delia was her nanny for her child, and Delia died quite young at 18 years old, actually. And Sharon was with her a great deal of the way and had a profound shared death experience with her.
Well,
so here's another piece. I'm a psychotherapist and I work in end of life and specialize in grief and bereavement. And the people who have these SDEs, their grief is radically different. And this is, some of you will know how uncomfortable you may feel if you've had these experiences and you feel joy, or you're with people who want to look at you as if, oh my gosh, they're projecting all their fears, understandably so, about losing a child. And you actually, you obviously didn't want the loss, but your grief is different. Your grief is held in a context that we call a continuation of the bond, a reworking of the relationship that you do, and you do in conjunction with your departed, in your case, child. So Stephanie says here, she's talking about her husband who died. I knew that he was okay, that he had gone back to a safe, wonderful, loving place. The grieving was very different for me because I understood that, and I missed him physically in this world, but I knew he was okay. Grief is held in a different context, a context that holds the knowing that our departed loved one is alive and well somewhere, and our relationship continues. So here's Adela, and Adela is actually a psychotherapist, a colleague of mine in Santa Barbara, a very well-respected therapist, and she talks about how the experience of her father dying. She had an SDE when her father died, and he did not believe in the afterlife, and so you'll see how she talks about this.
Well, I had a sense of the rightness of it, honestly. I know it's a kind of odd thing to say. I was so sad to not have him here with me anymore. But it was his time, and he was complete. And he left without fear, and I had a sense of completion, of the rightness, right alongside the grief of my personal loss of him as my dad in his life. But I knew he was fine. I hadn't really lost him, so I had a strong awareness of that, and the joy of that knowing was very deep.
So you see the way Adela talks about this, kind of the depth of knowing. She holds both the loss of her father, but the deeper context of knowing he's okay, and knowing that, she's a wise woman. She knows people die, and she was glad that she had the experience she did.
Well,
okay, so here's something really important, and you guys have talked about, this is kind of a core to your program at Helping People Heal. From what I can tell, I've talked to a number of your members, but 38% of the people in our study, these are people that came to us, of the 107 that we did in this study, but this is true with we've interviewed really hundreds. But 38% of the participants reported concern over being dismissed or ridiculed for sharing about their shared death experience. Every interview expressed gratitude for having a safe space to share their stories. And this second element here is what you guys do so well. You guys are like no other grief group that I am aware of in the world that does it systematically at your core in your mission to really help people talk about these profound experiences of ongoing connection with your departed loved ones, in your case, children. So, and there's therapeutic value in this. You know this. That's why you guys show up for your groups and are here tonight. There is healing in honoring these experiences. So, conclusion, this is really from our study. We found that remote SDEs were more common than bedside. This is a huge finding, 60%. And, we are now submitting journal articles, and people are kind of shocked by this. So this is going to be we think, a very helpful contribution to the literature. Visions of the dying one and the transcendent light are the most common phenomena. Certainty of an afterlife and reconciliation grief are some of the most common benefits. And over 40% of our experiences report having more than one SDE. This points to the capacity to develop receptivity. So what I want to invite you all to do is, if you've had an SDE, we are starting another round of research. We would love to hear from you. We really would. We'd appreciate every story teaches us more about this experience. The other aspects we're going to be studying are the shared crossing spectrum of end-of-life experience. This is what I gave a talk on last time. But any of these experiences, pre-death premonitions, so if you had a premonition that your child was going to die, we would really like to hear from you. and also pre-death dreams and visions. Synchronicities of any kind, pre-death, at death, post-death. We want to hear those. So many of you all talk about that. I actually saw the video, your new, relatively new video about helping parents heal. Talk so much about the signs that people hear from their departed children. We would love to hear more about those. And if you just email us at info@sharedcrossing or william@sharedcrossing.com, we will get back to you, most likely. Write up, give us a little brief headline to it, or as much as you want to write. You want to write more about it, we have on our contact page, we have a Shared Crossing testimonial guide that will allow you to write more in depth. Anyway, terminal lucidity, the shared death experience, post-death dreams and visions, after-death communication. We are interested in all of it, and we want to bring your stories, this information, to the world, and most importantly, to the healthcare community, so that they can develop, we can give them a solid academic, research-based foundation for honoring these. And then do I have anything else? I think I may be done. No, I'm done. So I'm going to close this now. So now is Q&A. And, I have a good deal of time here. So I really look forward to hearing your questions. If you have...
We have so many questions, but we're running out of time. It's almost 6 o'clock. So I can't keep people on the East Coast up too long, but I wanted to, first of all, say thank you for everything that you've done and said here. It is just so helpful and so healing to everyone. And I know that my shared death experience with Morgan changed my life. I feel like it created an incredible love in me that I had never experienced before, and a desire to be able to transmit this to everyone else, to let them know that our kids are completely okay, that they are having such a blast. But there are questions here, and I was going to say that we can try to answer a few questions very quickly, but if possible, if all of you who would like to get in touch with William, if you do so, that would be fabulous, because that way he can maybe hear about these experiences himself and be able to use them in the next round of research, which would be really great. I mean, having these experiences documented is so helpful for all of us, because it's going to allow everyone to understand this. And one of the things that I love the most about the shared death experience, and this is something that we talked about last time, is that in a near-death experience, people can explain it away, because they say that the brain has stopped, the heart has stopped, and it's because of the fact that people are experiencing hallucinations. With a shared death experience, these perfectly healthy people are experiencing these things that are happening to their loved ones in tandem with them. So there's no way to say that because they are unwell, these are happening to them. These are happening to perfectly healthy people. So this is a really great thing to have all of this research, to be able to show everyone that there's more, that life continues. So we have these questions that I'm going to also download and send to William so that he'll be able to answer you. One of the ones that I saw at the end here that I'd really love for you to answer is from Deb, and she has a question. Does this happen to people who are not familial connected, or not family with the person? Can one have an experience without knowing the person? She's a hospice volunteer. Does this work bedside?
Absolutely. We found the connection does help, for sure. But then there are people like hospice workers, hospice volunteers, will report feeling like either one of their patients came by to them to say goodbye. It's typically a flyby. It doesn't have to be, it can be more than that. But I can tell you, we have a phenomenon called flyby unknown sender. We call it flyby unknown sender. Some of us are just beacons for these. So like there's times when I have people coming by, I know it's somebody coming by, I can't locate it. And then I hear, a few days later, so-and-so died. And I think they're just trying to get this information to people who are receptive and able to receive. So yes, it's your answer.
Lindsay is saying, and this is something that I think is really important, I wish I felt that kind of love when my son passed. I quickly answered on here that I know that he was sending her love, that all of our loved ones send us that. We might not be equipped to be able to receive it at that time though. I don't know how you feel about that, but I agree with you with the yoga, with all of the mindful meditation and all of these other practices that allow us to be more open to that kind of thing. What do you think, William?
Well, I mean, I agree with what you said, Elizabeth. I do think that of the practices, we know that the practices help build receptivity. We also know that there are people with great deal of communication, great deal of spiritual development, great relationship, great contact with the person dying, and for some reason there is no SDE. This happens a lot, but what could possibly be happening is that the person who's transitioning has their own experience they're going through, and it can be quite profound, quite jarring going from this life to the next. So there are a lot of factors at play. We do encourage people to keep the receptivity open and ask them to communicate in some form of after death communication.
Well, I also just, this thing from Paula is so amazing. Her son passed in Nice on Bastille Day, the truck that went down the street. You might have already met Paula, actually. She says 2 years before Nicholas passed, I was watching television with my husband. I got up to use the restroom. On my way back to the couch, I felt in the corridor a presence that startled me. As soon as I sat down on the couch, suddenly I heard a message on my head saying, or in my head, excuse me, tell Nicholas that there is more life after life. It was really strange because afterlife was not one of our usual topics. 20 minutes later, the telephone rang. It was the hospital telling us that my husband's mother passed away. Could this have been a shared death experience with my mother-in-law to prepare us and my son Nicholas for his passing?
Beautiful. I'm getting goosebumps on that one because this is an experience. Paula, I do hope you call us on this one because we get these types of examples. It sounds like this. The veil opens with the death of a loved one, and the departing often use this to give us information to help us, to let us know that they can somehow, there's some timeless dimension, and their last act of love is sometime to give us some information that will help us in our lives. So we would love to hear that one if you'd be so kind as to call us.
That's really beautiful. Patty B is asking a question. My daughter had passed for 8 days before they found her. At that time, I had maggots in my carpet for no reason. My daughter-in-law had the word suicide in her head for days, and my son felt a sudden urge to pray for her. Do you think that this might be a manifestation of a shared death experience?
I'm thinking I have to hear more about that. That sounds a bit more like premonitions to me, or synchronistic events. We'd have to hear more, and we would love to hear more if she's willing. Yeah, some of these take some study and going through, and our team goes through these quite a bit.
Wonderful. Rebecca is asking an interesting question. Have you had anyone in your case studies reporting the dying seeing future events? My father, which sounds a lot like what Paula also said, but my father on his deathbed saw his son in uniform saying, "You look mighty fine in uniform." He showed up at the service in his military uniform, barely fitting as he hadn't worn it in years. My dad also was talking to a former classmate. He too showed up at the service stating, "I'm the last one of the class." My son, just months after he passed, asked me what would I do if he would die. I thought it was so odd of a question. I froze, but said, "Well, I would carry on, Will, for your sister, and if your sister, for you." So I guess this seeing something that's going to happen in the future is also part of it.
Once again, it's that notion that when that veil is open, we have insight into another dimension that does not seem to be constricted by the earthly time-space continuum. And so we often see future events that usually are delivered to us to help us in some way. So yeah, great. Oh, these are wonderful, wonderful.
Well, there's one, actually Suzanne's mother just passed a few weeks ago. 6 weeks ago, she was afraid to die. I experienced a remote SDE with her, very powerful, where she sent me the message she was okay. My son was also assisting her son who passed. She saw him in hospice and saw him a few hours before she passed. It definitely has given me peace. So her son Chris was there with her, which is wonderful.
Yeah, so you see the deceased loved ones there to comfort the person dying. Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful.
Well, I know that it's getting late. I want everybody to be sure to get the information off of the YouTube video that I'm going to be posting. Doris is saying, please make sure that it's posted on the YouTube channel on the video when I post this, which I will definitely. I have a lot of people who say that they're going to be calling you, so you're probably going to be getting a lot of calls. And I truly appreciate you being with us here tonight. Thank you so much. And before we close, we always have everyone unmute themselves to say thank you and good night. And thanks so much for being here. I just love seeing you every time you come. And let's see, Claudia is also talking about a shared death experience, but I'll send that to you so that you can read about it. It's also pretty amazing. So anyway, thanks so much. Again, unmute yourselves, say goodnight.
Thank you so much.
That was
Thank
so
you.
really
Thank you so
awesome.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
So much.
Thank
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias.